The gate seemed like nothing more than the entrance to a quiet residential area, but behind it lay secrets powerful enough to drown an entire town. Fairmont Crest, on the surface, bathed in the light of success, prestige, and luxurious mansions, was quietly simmering with a chain of dark events that could bring everything crashing down in an instant. No one realized that every step they took through that gate brought them closer to the abyss, where lies, betrayal, and conspiracy were tightening their grip. And as the truth began to seep through the cracks of seemingly solid relationships, a deadly domino effect was set into motion, one that no one could stop. On August 5th, 2025, in Fairmont Crest, the weight of buried secrets and grave mistakes began to rise, pulling everyone into a dangerous spiral. Doug was the first to face the consequences when Ted, the head of the hospital's executive board, harshly reprimanded him for an unacceptable error during a recent surgery. The entire body remains unchanged. Exactly as you've written it. Fairmont Crest, a city calm on the outside, is bracing for an explosive upheaval from within. One by one, each person, each secret, each calculated move is weaving into a web of conflict, preparing to drag every character into a battle no one can escape unscathed. And as the truth starts to emerge, it won't just be reputations that are destroyed, but love, life, and relationships once thought unshakable. This is only the beginning. Counterstrikes and even darker secrets waiting to be revealed. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episode, where the truth will have nowhere left to hide. August 5th, 2025. At Fairmont Crest, a day when buried secrets and grave mistakes began to surface, dragging everyone into a whirlpool of danger. Doug was the first to face the consequences when Ted, head of the hospital's executive board, harshly reprimanded him for an unacceptable error in a recent surgery. No one knew exactly what had gone wrong in the operating room, but whispers spread quickly through the cold, sterile corridors, suggesting that Doug had let his mind drift into a dark, chaotic space just as a patient slipped into critical condition after his procedure. This mistake could not be swept under the rug in the medical world. A moment of distraction can be the difference between life and death. Doug, once the pride of the hospital, now found himself at the center of growing suspicion. Ted's anger didn't stop at a scolding. He hinted that suspension was on the table if the matter wasn't taken seriously. Doug had no explanation for what had caused his hands to tremble at that critical moment. Even he didn't fully understand it. But deep down, he knew the reasons: a crumbling marriage, crushing gambling debts, and above all, the quiet betrayal of Vanessa. The woman who had once been his rock was now standing beside Joey, the very man Doug had always considered a thorn in his side. Lately, Doug had seemed like a ghost of himself. Vacant eyes, robotic movements, long moments of silence lost in thought. Colleagues had started to whisper behind his back. When Ted summoned him to the office, the door closed silently behind them, leaving only heavy air and the razor-sharp gaze of his superior. Ted didn't need to say much. Each word struck Doug like a blow to the chest, drowning him in humiliation. He no longer recognized himself, once a brilliant surgeon who saved countless lives. He now stood on the brink of losing everything due to a moment of instability. The unresolved issues with Joey hung over him like a phantom. Because Doug knew Joey wasn't just a slick manipulator, he could meddle in anything, including someone's personal and professional life. And when Vanessa, the woman Doug thought would always be by his side, fell into Joey's arms, everything began to crumble faster than he could imagine. Doug didn't know if this mistake would be the final straw that cost him his job, but he could feel the ground cracking beneath his feet, threatening to swallow his reputation and future whole. Questions swirled relentlessly in his head, keeping him from sleeping or resting. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of that surgery came back, reminding him that the worst might still be ahead. Doug walked into the hospital with a gloomy face, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights, his mind in turmoil, tangled in personal problems that tightened around him like an invisible noose. In the stark white hallway filled with tension and the echo of doctors' footsteps, Ted was waiting, his expression cold, eyes sharp as blades. The confrontation was inevitable. Doug had just made another serious mistake, and this time, the consequences could go far beyond a scolding. As a surgeon, Doug understood better than anyone that even a minute of lost focus could jeopardize a patient's life, yet that didn't stop the chaos that had taken root in his mind. A broken marriage, a suffocating gambling addiction, towering debts, and above all, the ambiguous relationship between Vanessa and Joey, all of it spun in his head like a storm, blurring the line between reason and despair. Doug had once let his personal life ruin his career, and it had nearly cost him everything. And now, he was back at the edge again, his once life-saving hands trembling from pressure, obsession, and jealousy. Ted had run out of patience. He called Doug out, interrogating him without sparing a single excuse. This wasn't a warning anymore, it was a wake-up call. A patient's life isn't something to gamble with. And a doctor who can't stay composed has no place in the operating room. The question wasn't just whether Doug would be reprimanded, it was whether he'd be suspended, or even lose his medical license if this mistake proved too serious. While Doug struggled with duty and personal breakdown, Vanessa moved through life with the polished grace of a successful real estate broker. She was used to luxury, to expensive dinners, and the admiration of those around her. But behind the glamorous exterior was a dark secret. The extra cash she suddenly had didn't come from property sales, but from a high-risk money laundering scheme with Joey, her new lover, a man with a shady past. Vanessa thought she could hide everything, that no one would ask questions. But Fairmont Crest was no place for secrets. Here, rumors spread faster than light. When people started to notice the sudden change in her lifestyle, when questions were asked about the source of her income, when the numbers stopped adding up, everything could collapse overnight. Joey knew how to operate in the shadows, but Vanessa didn't. She was always in the spotlight, always being watched, and even the smallest slip could bring everything crashing down. She wasn't just playing with fire, she was pouring gasoline on it. Meanwhile, Doug had no idea that the woman who once shared his bed was now laundering money behind his back with Joey. If he ever found out, it wouldn't just be emotional betrayal, it could drag him into a legal nightmare, especially at a time when he was already at risk of suspension over medical negligence. Ted looked at Doug with visible disappointment. He had once believed in the man, believed Doug could rebuild his life. But mistake after mistake, with no signs of recovery, had changed that. This was no longer about giving Doug another chance. It was about protecting innocent patients from a doctor teetering on collapse. A firm decision had to be made. Doug tried to explain himself, but his words rang hollow. No one cared how long he'd been sleepless, or how Joey had stolen Vanessa from him. The only thing the hospital needed was a competent, clear-minded surgeon, someone who wouldn't kill a patient on the table. In that moment, Doug realized he was losing everything: his job, his respect, his trust, his dignity, even himself. On the other side of town, Vanessa was starting to feel the heat. Though she maintained her calm facade, she could sense the suspicious glances turning her way. If anyone decided to dig deeper into her accounts, her unexplained transactions, or simply ask the wrong question at the wrong time, she and Joey would have no way out. In a town where everything is remembered and every misstep is gossiped about, Vanessa knew her time was running out. Doug was spiraling. Vanessa was playing a dangerous game. Ted was on the brink of making a life-altering decision. And Joey, like a ghost, continued pulling the strings from behind the scenes. When the truth comes out, when trust is broken, when justice begins to speak, no one will be able to keep their place. Fairmont Crest simmered beneath its peaceful surface. And Tuesday, August 5th, would become a day no one could forget, the moment when everything hidden began to fracture. Meanwhile, as everything began slipping out of control, Ashley was caught in a painful emotional tug-of-war. Her old feelings for Derek still lingered, but her heart was slowly leaning toward Andre, the man who had once left her, but now returned unexpectedly, carrying a presence she couldn't ignore. After their heavy breakup, Ashley had thought she'd closed every emotional door. But Andre, with his romantic charm and that Parisian-inspired apartment, had rekindled a buried longing in her. No one would have guessed that a few paintings, some scented candles, and a soft French melody could make Ashley feel like she was living the dream she once confided to her mother. And when she turned to Jan to open up, the conversation became more than just a mother-daughter talk. It was a confession of the heart. Jan understood her daughter better than anyone, and she could see that dreamy look in her eyes. It was something Ashley reserved for only one person. Without needing many words, Jan could feel that Andre had once again made Ashley's heart skip a beat, even though the risk of heartbreak constantly lingered around that man. And yet, it was precisely this danger that made Jan's advice a powerful catalyst, pushing Ashley toward a bold decision. When Andre appeared at the photo exhibition that weekend, time seemed to stand still. Their eyes met, and no words were needed to understand. Ashley knew that moment could change everything, and when Andre gently held her hand under the brilliant lights, the kiss they shared was not just a reunion, it was the beginning of a new fire waiting to ignite. But in Fairmont Crest, any sweet emotion could bring consequences. Derek was not someone who let go easily, and Andre's return was like pouring fuel onto a relationship already filled with turmoil. While Ashley was lost in newfound joy, Derek, backed by his powerful family ties, began investigating the true reason behind Andre's return. All signs eventually led him to a secret Andre desperately wanted to keep hidden. At the same time, Vanessa felt more pressure than ever before. It wasn't just about money. The looks around her had started turning into eyes of suspicion. She kept a calm facade, continued attending charity auctions and local events, smiling and signing contracts as if nothing was wrong. But every step, every word, was under scrutiny. Joey, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. He even reassured her that everything was under control. But Vanessa knew Joey too well, and that alone made her anxious. Joey never did anything without personal gain, and his sudden concern only made her more uneasy. One day, she caught him speaking with a strange man outside an exclusive club. They didn't see her, but their urgency, expressions, and body language convinced Vanessa that something much bigger was being hidden. She began to wonder, was she merely a pawn in a much larger money laundering scheme? Meanwhile, Doug was still under hospital management's microscope. An internal investigation was underway, and several nurses had been called to testify. No one dared say anything openly, but everyone knew that without a major turnaround, Doug could be permanently suspended, or even have his license revoked. Yet Doug didn't fight back. He quietly continued working, never defending himself, as if accepting whatever punishment came his way. Because deep down, what hurt more than losing his job was losing the trust of those around him. In his loneliest moment, he realized that the only person who had ever trusted him unconditionally was the one who betrayed him, Vanessa. Doug began watching her, not out of jealousy, but suspicion. A few odd signs, strange phone calls, and unexplained absences made it impossible to ignore. Then, when he accidentally found a suspicious wire transfer with no sender, it poured gasoline on the fire of his doubts. He followed the trail, and it all pointed back to Joey. The bigger picture started to emerge, and Doug realized that the recent surgical error might not have been just a moment of distraction. He started asking himself, had someone tampered with his mental state? Was there something falsified in the patient records? As he reviewed all the files and security footage, he found a gap in the video right before the surgery. Doug didn't want to believe someone in the hospital was involved, but when the clues led to a nurse once connected to Joey, he realized this was part of something far larger than he'd imagined. Not just his career, but his life might be in danger. As the pieces came together, Doug saw himself as a potential victim in a calculated conspiracy, one designed to remove him and clear the path for a deeper money laundering operation from inside the hospital. That realization made it impossible for him to stay silent. Desperate, Doug contacted an old friend at the FBI, providing initial information about Joey, shady connections between financial transfers and real estate files. He knew that if this step were discovered, he could lose everything, but doing nothing might be worse. As Doug plunged deeper into this web of danger, Ashley began to notice inconsistencies in Andre's stories, calls he declined to answer, and most unsettling, the appearance of a strange woman outside her gallery. The woman said nothing, just stared for a long time, then left, but left Ashley with a deep sense of unease. She started fact-checking the information Andre had shared, and the more she looked, the more vague things became. One late night, she snuck into Andre's apartment while he was out, and opened the drawer in his office he always kept locked. What she found hit her like a slap. Investment contracts tied directly to the same properties Vanessa was brokering, and worse, a photo of Andre and Joey together from years ago, back when they were in New York. There was no longer any doubt. Andre was not innocent. He was part of the money laundering network, and he hadn't returned for love, but for a very specific purpose: to use Ashley to legitimize art transactions, one of the most common modern methods of laundering money. Ashley felt her world crumble. She had given her heart to a liar, and worse, unknowingly helped enable a chain of crimes. She told no one, quietly gathering more evidence, saving documents, taking screenshots of messages, and preparing for a counterattack. Each scheme was now intertwining and clashing, pushing everyone into a battle no one would escape unscathed. As all eyes turned toward Ashley and Andre's reunion, Derek never stepped back. He silently observed, watching for shifts in Ashley's behavior. Though he expressed no emotion, every small gesture revealed his rising insecurity. Derek had never believed he could be replaced, especially not by a man who had once abandoned the woman he loved. But the truth was slowly unfolding before him. Instead of confronting Andre directly, Derek chose quiet investigation. He dug into Andre's past, the years he had gone missing, the places he'd been. It didn't take long for Derek to uncover irregularities in Andre's financial records. Large sums of money from unknown sources, transactions linked to a company once accused of money laundering on the East Coast. Piece by piece, a map began to form, convincing Derek that Andre's return was not just about love. In a world where trust was a luxury, Derek knew even a small misstep could reduce everything to ashes. He had no intention of letting go, not when Ashley was someone he still couldn't forget, and especially not when the man who made him feel most threatened was getting closer to her heart. Meanwhile, Joey expanded his operations, using Vanessa as the perfect front for increasingly risky deals. He knew suspicions were forming around them, but Joey wasn't one to scare easily. Every step, every relationship, every fund moved into undervalued real estate was calculated, exploiting weak banking systems and loopholes in financial regulations. To him, Vanessa was a key pawn, intelligent and well-connected enough to avoid suspicion. But that also made her the most vulnerable if anything went wrong. Joey didn't tolerate mistakes, and what angered him most was the sense that Vanessa was wavering. She'd recently grown anxious, asked unnecessary questions, and hesitated to sign important papers without reviewing them first. To Joey, hesitation was a fatal weakness. He began considering replacing her if she couldn't stay composed. Doug, after a tense conversation with Ted, had no choice but to investigate his own life. He suspected someone had tampered with his mental state during surgery, a mistake that, given his skills, should have been impossible. He wondered, had someone altered his medication? Had the patient files been forged? Reviewing documents and camera footage, Doug wasn't surprised to find a signal loss right before his operation. Reluctantly, he admitted that someone inside the hospital might be involved. When a nurse with past ties to Joey surfaced in the investigation, it all clicked. Doug realized he wasn't just fighting for his license, he was fighting for his life. The conspiracy was bigger than he ever imagined, designed to remove him and open a new path for money laundering from within the hospital. This truth left him no choice. In desperation, he reached out to an FBI contact, offering early leads on Joey and the real estate schemes. He knew it was dangerous, but doing nothing was even riskier. As Doug descended into a swamp of resistance and truth, Ashley began uncovering cracks in Andre's stories. Disconnected details, ignored calls, and a mysterious woman watching her were red flags she couldn't ignore. Her search revealed holes in Andre's backstory, and when she found incriminating documents in his locked drawer, the final veil fell. Andre and Joey were connected, and her trust had been weaponized. Ashley didn't confront him. She silently collected more evidence, backing up files and preparing for what was coming. Fairmont Crest, calm on the surface, was bracing for a violent reckoning. Secrets, betrayals, and ambition were about to collide, threatening to destroy not just reputations, but love, life, and every seemingly unshakable bond. Fairmont Crest has never been a place for the weak. When buried secrets begin to leak out, when every glance is filled with suspicion, and every step is weighed down by poor choices, one thing is certain: no one can escape the price. And this is only the beginning. Will Doug keep his position, or will he collapse under the weight of guilt and betrayal? Will Vanessa continue to play with fire, or will she be consumed by what she thought she controlled? New alliances will form, betrayals will be revealed, and the game will become more dangerous than ever. Don't take your eyes off the Fairmont Crest gates. Subscribe to stay tuned for more, where each episode is a surprising piece in the ever-changing puzzle. The truth waits for no one, and neither will you.